There is this highly specific frequency of sound that if you play it for literally any football fan anywhere in the world, it instantly transports them back to a very specific moment in time.
You don't need a picture. You don't even need to name the year.
Exactly. You just play this like buzzing, this massive, collective, unyielding swarm of mechanical bees just echoing through a concrete stadium, and you know exactly where and when you are. The Vuvuzela.
It really is an acoustic signature unlike anything else in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
I mean, the sheer volume of it fundamentally altered how the game was experienced, right? Both for the players on the pitch who couldn't hear each other and the millions watching at home.
Right. Some broadcasters absolutely hated it. But you picture that historic moment for you, the listener, remembering South Africa as the very first African nation to ever host the tournament. The globe is watching, the anticipation is just off the charts, and then Sifuet Shabala unleashes that iconic opening goal against Mexico.
Oh, the stadium absolutely erupted. A total sea of yellow and green. It felt like the dawn of a massive new era for South African football.
Yeah, the moment they finally staked their claim on the global stage.
It felt like an arrival, a true coronation of the sport on the African continent. But the reality of what actually followed, however, was a pretty sobering lesson.
Yeah, the difference between hosting a massive party and actually being able to compete in the marathon that follows it.
Exactly. Even in that 2010 tournament, despite pulling off a 2-1 victory over France in their final game, the structural and tactical fractures were already starting to show.
Right. So fast forward from that massive high, and the team basically just vanished. Bafana Bafana, the absolute pride of the host nation, became the first host in the history of the World Cup to exit in the group stage.
Which is a tough pill to swallow.
A really tough pill. And then they disappeared from the World Cup stage for 16 long years, from 2010 all the way to now.
It's a massive trap.
It is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack a really massive stack of sources. We're talking tactical analyses, historical retrospectives, betting odds, and squad announcements to really understand South Africa's 2026 World Cup campaign in North America.
And there's a lot to unpack.
So much. We are going to explore how they rebuilt themselves from the ground up, dissect their highly unusual squad chemistry, expose their glaring weaknesses, and map out their path through a really brutal Group A.
What's really fascinating here, I think, is that this isn't your standard, underdog sports narrative. It's this complex case study of a team trying to overcome its own historical ghosts.
And deeply ingrained administrative chaos, let's be real.
Oh, absolutely. They are attempting to do this by relying on a deeply integrated, homegrown tactical identity that defies almost every modern trend in international football.
Right. So to really grasp the gravity of this return for you listening, you have to understand the identity of the team itself, the weight of the jersey. We throw around the nickname Bafana Bafana, which is recognized globally.
Right. Everyone knows it.
But the origin of that name is deeply, deeply tied to the rebirth of the nation itself. It translates from Zulu to the boys, or more accurately, the boys.
Context is so crucial here for anyone trying to understand the emotional stakes, because organized soccer in South Africa was historically fractured by racial segregation under apartheid.
Right.
The government enforced completely separate governing bodies for white, Indian, Bantu, and black communities. And because of this institutionalized racism, the country was officially banned from FIFA for 16 years.
And effectively suspended from international competition for 40 years. They were completely isolated.
Exactly. It wasn't until 1991, as the apartheid system was actively being dismantled, that a new multiracial governing body was founded, the South African Football Association, or SAFA.
So when they finally achieved readmission to FIFA and played their first international match in 2 decades, which was a 1-0 win over Cameroon in July 1992, the fans in the stadium just started spontaneously chanting, "Bafana, Bafana."
It wasn't some corporate marketing slogan.
No, it was a totally organic outpouring of support. 3 journalists from the Saudi newspaper heard the chant, started using it in their match reports, and it just permanently fused to the team's identity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, academic journals that analyze the nicknames of African national teams point out that Bafana Bafana actually serves as a linguistic index of South African national identity.
Meaning it's more than just a catchy name.
Much more. It operates as a reflection of multiracial unity born out of the end of apartheid. It embodies the concept of Ubuntu togetherness. It's a symbol of social cohesion that completely transcends the 90 minutes on the grass.
Which is beautiful. But here's where the story takes a wildly bureaucratic, almost unbelievable turn. SAFA, this newly formed governing body, actually hated the name initially.
They really did.
They felt it was degrading to call a team of grown men boys, and perhaps more crucially, they just didn't think it was commercially viable. So they didn't trademark it.
They just left it alone.
They completely left this culturally massive, fan-generated identity legally unprotected. And a local clothing company called Stanton Woodrush saw the opportunity, swooped in, and applied to trademark the name for themselves in 1993.
That is just wow.
It triggered a protracted legal battle that dragged on for years. Because once SAFA realized the immense commercial and cultural power of the name they had dismissed, they fought to get it back.
I assume they argued they were the rightful owners since it was their team.
They did, and the dispute went all the way to the appeal court, which ultimately dismissed SAFA's claim. The legal precedent essentially stated that just having an intention to use a mark doesn't grant you preference over an entity that actually filed the paperwork.
So they lost their own name.
It's an incredible unforced error. They had to buy back their own identity. In 2011, SAFA finally had to capitulate and pay Stanton Woodrush 5 million rand just to secure the trademark rights in all classes.
So they spent millions to own the name the fans had literally given them for free.
Exactly. And you can understand why they fought so hard, because Bafana Bafana experienced a true golden era immediately following that 1992 readmission. They hosted and won the Africa Cup of Nations in 1996, reached the final in 98, and qualified for the World Cup in 98 and 2002.
They were an absolute powerhouse on the continent.
A powerhouse that unfortunately slowly eroded.
Yeah, the FIFA retrospectives really map out a prolonged period of decline following that era.
Yeah.
I mean, they failed to qualify for 3 successive World Cups after the 2010 host curse.
And missed out on AFCONs, too.
Yeah, completely missed out on multiple Africa Cup of Nations tournaments, 2010, 2012, 2021. The momentum from the late 90s just evaporated. It was replaced by a struggle to maintain any sort of competitive tactical identity.
I like to frame it this way for you listening. Bafana Bafana operates like a pioneering indie rock band that dropped a massive culture-defining hit album decades ago. They changed the landscape.
I like that analogy.
But then they suffered through years of creative drought, constant lineup changes, messy management disputes, and they kind of faded into the background while new bands took over the charts. Now suddenly they are booked to headline a major festival again.
Right, the fans are thrilled. But the critical question hanging over them is mechanical. Have they actually updated their sound to compete with modern acoustics? Or are they just relying on the nostalgia of the old hits?
Exactly. And to answer that, you really have to look at the new frontman calling the shots.
Hugo Bruce.
Yes, the 74-year-old Belgian tactician who stepped into the role in mid-2021.
He brings a radically different philosophy to the dressing room. Our sources universally describe him as a strict, uncompromising disciplinarian.
Which they probably needed.
Absolutely. And he is intimately familiar with the brutal realities of African football, having won the AFCON with Cameroon back in 2017. Plus, he just dragged South Africa to a highly impressive third-place finish at the 2023 AFCON in Ivory Coast.
Right. He effectively dismantled the national team's old identity. He stripped away the reliance on individual isolation plays, where teams just give the ball to their most talented player and hope for a miracle.
The old give it to the star tactic.
Exactly. And he forced them into a highly structured, younger, and physically robust collective unit.
You can really see the results in their CAF Group C qualifying campaign. They topped a brutal group, beating out heavyweights like Nigeria and Benin, finishing with 5 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses.
They absolutely grinded their way through it. And this is a massive... But the front office almost derailed the entire campaign. The administrative chaos we mentioned earlier reared its head in a way that is almost hard to believe for a professional organization.
Yeah, the structural disorganization of South African football is this recurring historical theme. It operates as a constant phantom opponent the team has to defeat before they even step onto the pitch.
Let's work through the mechanics of this specific blunder for you, because it's wild. South Africa plays Lesotho in a critical qualifier in March 2025. They win 2-0, they secure the points.
Everything looks great on paper.
Right. Except they fielded their star midfielder Teboho Mokoena, and Mokoena had accumulated 2 yellow cards in previous qualifying games.
Which mathematically triggers an automatic one-match suspension.
Exactly. FIFA realizes this, steps in, overturns the 2-0 win, converts it into a 3-0 forfeit loss, and docks South Africa the 3 points. And Safa didn't even attempt an appeal. They just quietly accepted the fine of over R216,000.
The irony embedded in this failure is just profound. The top soccer official in South Africa, Patrice Motsepe, also serves as a FIFA vice president and the head of CF.
Oh, wow.
Beyond that, he literally owns Mamelodi Sundowns, the very club Teboho Mokoena plays for.
So the embarrassment just radiates on multiple levels. You have Bruce on the touchline demanding microscopic tactical perfection from his players, while the Federation's front office fails to execute the most basic administrative task, keeping a tally of yellow cards on a spreadsheet.
And this isn't even a new phenomenon. It directly echoes catastrophic past blunders.
Oh, like 2011.
Yes, 2011, when then-coach Pitso Moseman completely misread the tiebreaker rules during an AFCON qualifier.
I remember this. He operated under the assumption that a draw against Sierra Leone was enough to secure qualification.
Exactly. So he instructed his team to play defensively, grind out the draw, and they literally celebrated on the pitch at the final whistle. They only found out later that Niger had progressed at their expense because the tournament tiebreaker was based on head-to-head records, not overall goal difference.
They engineered a tactical plan for a draw when the mathematics strictly required a win, simply
No.
because the coaching staff and the administration failed to comprehend the tournament rulebook.
It's devastating.
I have to ask you, though, how does a national federation at the absolute zenith of the sport continue to operate with this level of administrative friction? Like, how does this impact the locker room? Because if I am a player running myself to the point of physical exhaustion for 90 minutes, executing a flawless tactical game plan, and I lose 3 points because a suit in an office forgot to check a suspension list, that has to create a massive psychological burden.
Oh, it absolutely does. It forces the players and the manager to construct an impenetrable mental fortress. It introduces this volatile element of unpredictability that elite athletes really shouldn't have to factor into their preparation.
Right, they should just be focusing on the game.
Bruce basically has to cultivate a squad mentality that is so resilient and a point total that is so robust that a 3-point administrative deduction doesn't eliminate them. He essentially has to coach his team to beat the opponent on the pitch and his own administration off it.
And miraculously, he managed to do exactly that. He forged a squad with a distinct on-pitch identity that breaks almost every convention of modern international football. Let's examine that tactical blueprint, because this is where the South African strategy becomes truly fascinating.
Yeah, if you look at major African national teams today, Senegal, Morocco, Nigeria, their rosters read like a who's who of the English Premier League, La Liga, and Serie A.
Right. The standard operating procedure is to fly these scattered superstars in from Europe a week before a major tournament, run 3 light training sessions, and just pray they figure out how to play together.
Bruce has threw that entire model in the trash. Out of his 26-man World Cup squad, 19 of them play domestically in the South African Premier Soccer League, the PSL.
A domestic concentration of that magnitude is practically unheard of for a World Cup squad in 2026, outside of nations like maybe Saudi Arabia or Qatar.
Exactly. But it's not merely that they play in the same league. It is the hyper-concentration within that league. Tactical analysts refer to this as a dual backbone system.
Explain that for us.
Well, Bruce selected 8 players from Mamelodi Sundowns, the club that recently won the 2026 CAF Champions League, establishing them as the apex predators of African club football.
Right.
And he paired them with 8 players from Orlando Pirates, the reigning domestic champions. 16 of his 26 players are drawn from just 2 domestic clubs.
These players aren't just countrymen meeting up a few times a year. They are daily co-workers. You have Ronwen Williams, Kuisa Mudau, Aubrey Modiba, Teboho Mokoena, and Themba Zwine all operating together at Sundowns.
And then you have Inkosanathi Sibisi, Thalenti Mbatha, Oswan Apollos, Evidence Magopa, and Relibahel Mofoking, all drilling together at Pirates.
This provides a monumental structural advantage. International football is usually plagued by a lack of cohesion. National teams often look disjointed because the players don't know each other's physiological tells.
Right, but Bafana steps onto the pitch with the pre-established, hardwired telepathy of a club team.
Like, when Mokoena receives the ball in central midfield under pressure, he doesn't need to visually scan the right flank to see if Mudau is making an overlapping run.
He knows exactly where Mudau is.
Right?
He knows what speed he is running and which foot he prefers the ball delivered to, because they execute that exact sequence every single day at the Sundowns training ground.
Think of it like a group project in school. Most national teams are randomly assigned groups trying to figure out how to work together the night before the project is due. Bafana Bafana is the group of best friends who have been doing projects together for years. They don't even need to speak to know what the other is doing.
It's a great analogy. It's like grafting a high-performance engine from a wrecked sports car into a new chassis of the exact same make and model. You don't have to rewrite the computer systems or manufacture custom brackets.
The wiring harness just clicks perfectly into place.
Exactly. The transmission syncs instantly, and you can redline the engine immediately. Bruce doesn't have to teach these players how to communicate. He just has to point them at the opponent.
So he leverages this club's synergy to implement a highly demanding tactical shift. The sources say he utilizes a 4-2-3-1 or a fluid 3-5-2 system that requires total synchronized movement.
Yeah, they are not attempting to play possession-heavy tiki-taka football. The strategy is built on defensive solidity, structural compactness, and fast vertical transitions.
Let's break down what that actually looks like on the grass for you listening. What is structural compactness?
Think of a mid-block, like a tightly coiled spring resting in the exact center of the pitch. They aren't pressing high and frantically near the opponent's penalty box, which leaves space behind them. And they aren't parked desperately deep in front of their own goalkeeper either.
They just hold the middle.
They hold a rigid, compact formation in the middle third of the field. They restrict the space the opponent has to pass through, absorb the pressure, and wait for the opponent to make a mistake.
And then what happens?
The second they win the ball, the vertical transition triggers. Instead of passing sideways to keep possession, they immediately fire the ball forward into the space the opponent just vacated. You can only execute that kind of coordinated, trap-setting defense if the players implicitly trust each other's spatial awareness.
Right. And the sources emphasize that the PSL is financially powerful and competitive enough to keep this top-tier talent from migrating to lower-level European leagues. It allows Bruce to monitor his core group constantly.
And this is a massive, but that very same domestic comfort creates Bafana's most glaring existential vulnerability on the world stage, the Achilles heel.
Yeah, the domestic concentration acts as a double-edged sword. It generates unparalleled internal chemistry, but it fosters a severe external isolation.
The primary weakness flagged across multiple analytical models, including RotoWire and SuperBrew, is a shocking lack of international exposure.
The data on this is really alarming. In the 11 years leading up to this World Cup, South Africa played a grand total of 5 matches against non-African opponents. 5. Andorra, France, Paraguay, Panama, and Nicaragua. That is an infinitesimal sample size against the tactical variety of the rest of the globe. And in their recent tune-up friendlies against Panama, they managed a 1-1 draw and suffered a 2-1 loss. They aren't exactly bulldozing international competition.
This is the true peril of tactical isolation. The African continent possesses a distinct footballing rhythm, often highly physical, direct, and individually combative.
Right.
Because Bafana hasn't regularly tested themselves against European, Asian, or South American opposition, they are stepping into the World Cup sort of blind to the varied global tactical systems and the sheer speed of thought required at this level.
Okay, I'm going to push back on the severity of this a little bit, because if Sundowns can win the CF Champions League against the absolute best tactical minds from Egypt and Morocco teams that frequently play in the Club World Cup, does it really matter that they haven't played friendlies against European teams? Isn't the fundamental geometry of the sport the same? Like, the pitch dimensions don't change?
Well, the geometry is the same, but the physics of how the opponent manipulates that geometry changes drastically.
How so?
Imagine you are a world-class boxer. You have mastered every combination and defensive slip against other boxers. If you step into a mixed martial arts octagon, you might still get taken down in 10 seconds by a wrestler. Not because you aren't an elite fighter, but because your muscle memory is programmed for a completely different kinetic language.
I see.
European teams might employ intricate, rapid passing structures designed to overload specific zones of the pitch. South American teams might use intense, coordinated, high-pressing triggers that PSL teams never utilize. If you haven't faced a team that violently presses your center backs the second the goalkeeper rolls the ball out, you might panic and turn the ball over.
Oh, and the margin for error at the World Cup is microscopic.
Exactly. Unfamiliarity breeds hesitation.
That hesitation is catastrophic when you factor in their second massive weakness, goal scoring. They simply do not put the ball in the net reliably.
Chance conversion was highlighted as a critical vulnerability throughout their entire qualifying campaign. Their defensive structure is elite, but they lack a ruthless, clinical finisher to capitalize on those fast vertical transitions.
You look at the veteran attacking midfielder, Themba Zwane. He is their top scorer, but he only has 12 goals and 53 caps. That is a return of roughly 1 goal every 4.5 games.
Not exactly a prolific strike rate.
Not at all. Beyond him, there isn't a single player in the squad with double-digit international goals. They are pushing almost the entire offensive burden onto the shoulders of one specific player.
Lyle Foster.
Yes, Lyle Foster. He is 25 years old. He is the absolute outlier in the squad because he is the only player out of the 26 who is based in the UK, currently playing for Burnley.
He is the solitary focal point of the attack.
And our sources specifically note his recent return to the pitch after stepping away to battle silent depression. He is carrying the immense weight of a nation's goal-scoring expectations while actively managing his mental health.
Bruce has been very protective of him, stating publicly that Foster needs time to rediscover his confidence. But the World Cup schedule doesn't really offer a grace period for confidence building.
No, it doesn't. And Foster's role brings us to the core architecture of the team. Because they lack global exposure and struggle to score, Bruce's system is entirely dependent on a specific spine of veteran players.
They form the central nervous system of Bafana Bafana. If any component of this spine breaks down or is tactically neutralized by the opposition, the entire organism basically collapses.
Let's trace that spine from back to front for you listening. It starts with the absolute rock of the team, Ronwen Williams, 34 years old, the captain, and the goalkeeper for Mamelodi Sundowns.
Williams is the vocal organizer of that deep defensive structure we discussed earlier. With over 60 caps, his experience is just irreplaceable.
And his global reputation is wild.
It's built on an almost supernatural composure during penalty shootouts. During the 2023 AFCON, he achieved something practically unheard of.
Yeah.
He saved 4 penalties in a single shootout against Cape Verde.
4 penalties.
4. And he replicated those heroics for Sundowns in the Champions League final in Rabat.
The mechanics of saving 4 penalties at that level are mind-bending. It isn't just guesswork. It requires immense psychological warfare, reading the microscopic shifts in the striker's hips, and explosive reflex speed. He is an absolute wall.
He really is. And moving up from Williams, connecting the defense to Foster, we find the engine room. Teboho Mokoena, 29 years old, 56 caps, also from Sundowns.
Mokoena operates as the archetypal box-to-box midfielder, and his physiological load is just punishing. In Bruce's system, Mokoena is tasked with anchoring the defense, breaking up the opposition's passing lanes, retaining the ball when surrounded by pressing defenders, and instantly dictating the tempo of the counterattack.
He operates in a constant state of oxygen debt.
Yeah, he has to be everywhere.
Furthermore, when the team inevitably struggles to break down a low-block defense through intricate passing, Mokoena serves as the artillery. His ability to strike the ball cleanly from long range is a vital alternative weapon.
So you have Williams organizing the spatial geometry at the back, Mokoena driving the physical transition through the middle, and Foster operating as a solitary spearhead. It's a rigid, defined spine.
But relying solely on 3 veterans isn't enough to survive the tactical diversity of a World Cup.
No, Bruce needed to inject specialized tools into the squad to address specific historical flaws, which brings us to the next generation of promising stars.
Right. Bruce's squad selection here is highly analytical. He didn't simply select the youngest, flashiest players available. He selected specific physical and technical profiles designed to solve complex tactical equations that have traditionally exposed South Africa.
The prime example is the kid they call the president, Relebogile Mofokeng. He is 21 years old, playing for Orlando Pirates.
A fascinating detail from the sources here, he actually grew up playing under his mother's surname, Ratomo, but officially changed it to Mofokeng right before his breakout season.
Right, signaling a new era for himself, personally and professionally.
Mofokeng is the most highly scrutinized prospect in South African football right now. He produced a stellar domestic season leading up to the tournament, logging 10 goals and 8 assists.
However, his international transition hasn't been completely seamless. He had a remarkably quiet AFCON campaign, only seeing the pitch for 96 minutes across the entire tournament.
And Bruce was bluntly honest about why. He stated that the sudden explosion of fame really overwhelmed the 21-year-old.
Yeah, Bruce said everyone suddenly wanted a piece of him and the psychological pressure caused him to literally forget how to play his game.
To counter this, Bruce and Mofokeng's club coach, Adeslam Wadu, executed a massive positional shift. Mofokin used to operate as a traditional touchline winger.
But Bruce publicly noted the mechanical limitations of playing Mofoking on the wing at the international level. He stated he doesn't have the explosiveness and dribbling on the line. Those are not his qualities.
Exactly. At the World Cup level, if a winger lacks elite track star speed, international fullbacks will simply push them out of bounds. So Bruce moved him into a central, space-exploiting playmaker role.
Which is fundamentally harder. When you play on the wing, the sideline acts as an extra defender, but you only have to scan the field in a 180-degree arc. Everything is in front of you.
Right, but when you move to the center, you have to possess 360-degree vision.
Yeah.
You're surrounded by defensive midfielders looking to take your head off.
It's like moving a talented but isolated lead guitarist into the role of the band's frontman. He doesn't have the raw speed for the wing, but his intelligence in the center changes the whole dynamic of the team.
By moving Mofoking there, Bruce is gambling that the kid's spatial intelligence can serve as the creative lockpick they desperately need to feed Lyle Foster, even if he lacks raw pace.
Exactly. Mofoking is there to solve the creativity deficit. But Bruce also had to address a severe physical deficit.
Historically, Bafana Bafana has been highly susceptible to tall, physically imposing direct opponents. Teams that bypass the midfield, launch aerial balls into the penalty box, and simply bully the South African center backs in the air.
So Bruce went out and drafted a specific, towering antidote to that historical flaw. The defensive duo of Mbekazeli Mbokazi and Ime Okan.
Mbokazi is just 20 years old, a massive, highly physical, left-footed center back developing in the MLS with the Chicago Fire.
And he is paired with Okan, a 22-year-old refining his trade in Germany with Hannover 96.
These two players represent a literal paradigm shift for the national team's physical profile.
Bruce stated unequivocally after a friendly against Nicaragua that surviving at the highest level requires raw power. Mbokazi and Okan aren't there to play beautiful passes out from the back.
No, their specific mechanical function is to dominate aerial duels, physically clear the penalty area, and ensure South Africa cannot be bullied into submission.
So this precise blend, the veteran spine of Williams, Makana, and Foster, combined with the specialized young tools of Mofoking, Mbokazi, and Okan, is going to be thrown into the fire immediately. Let's map out their exact path through Group A, because it is a gauntlet of clashing tactical philosophies.
Group A offers a fascinating tactical rock-paper-scissors scenario. Every team presents a drastically different physical and spatial challenge.
They open the tournament on June 11th at the legendary Estadio Azteca against the co-hosts, Mexico. The psychological pressure of playing the host nation in the opening match is immense.
But the true opponent in this match isn't wearing a green jersey, it's the altitude.
Mexico City sits at 2,250 meters above sea level.
The physics of the game literally change at that altitude. The air density is lower, meaning there is less drag on the ball. Passes travel faster, shots don't dip as predictably, creating nightmares for goalkeepers trying to read the flight path.
Right, and furthermore, the thin air starves the muscles of oxygen. For a South African team that relies on high-energy vertical transitions and a box-to-box engine like Mokoena, the physical toll will be excruciating.
Tactically, Mexico, managed by Javier Aguirre, is incredibly sound defensively. They recently ground out draws against heavyweights like Portugal and Belgium.
However, they lack offensive firepower, relying almost entirely on Raul Jimenez to produce moments of magic. Because of this dynamic, the betting markets strongly anticipate a defensive slog, heavily favoring under 2.5 goals.
South Africa's tactical approach here is pure survival. They will deploy that deep, compact block, minimize the physical exertion required to press, absorb the Mexican possession, and attempt to grind out a point.
They're essentially trying to replicate the 1-1 draw they achieved against Mexico back in the 2010 opening match.
If the altitude doesn't break their lungs, the sheer physical assault waiting for them in match 2 just might. On June 18th, they fly to Atlanta to face Czechia.
This is exactly why Bruce drafted Mbokazi and Okan.
Czechia, under Miroslav Kubek, operates a highly direct wing-back system. The mechanics of this system are designed to create numerical overloads on the flanks, allowing them to launch a relentless barrage of aerial crosses into the penalty box.
Targeting massive forwards like Patrick Schick and Tomas Souček.
It will be an absolute aerial bombardment. If the young South African center backs mistime a single jump or lose track of their marking assignments for a fraction of a second, Czechia will punish them.
However, if Mbokazi and Okan can clear the airspace, Czechia's aggressive use of wingbacks naturally leaves massive pockets of empty space behind them on the flanks.
And if Mokena can win the second ball, He can immediately launch vertical passes into those spaces for Mofokeng and the wingers to exploit on the counter.
So if they survive the altitude and the aerial assault, their progression will likely hinge on Match 3, June 24th in Monterrey against South Korea.
This represents a completely different tactical puzzle, the transition battle.
South Korea, spearheaded by Paris Saint-Germain's Kang In Lee and Tottenham's Son Heung-min, are agile, technically flawless, and move the ball at blinding speed.
But our sources identify a critical structural weakness. South Korea is highly vulnerable to physical direct disruption.
Right, they recently suffered heavy, demoralizing warm-up defeats to physical African and South American sides, losing 4-0 to Ivory Coast and 5-0 to Brazil.
This is universally viewed as South Africa's most viable opportunity for a victory. South Korea wants to play intricate passes through the midfield.
If Mokona and the South African mid-block can physically impose themselves, disrupt the passing lanes, and turn the match into a fractured, combative brawl, they can strip South Korea of their rhythm and catch them out of position.
Let's look at the mathematics of progression here. Major predictive models, including RotoWire and SuperBrew, are completely writing South Africa off, projecting them to finish dead last in Group A.
I mean, if betting markets and major pundits are picking them to finish dead last, are we just being overly optimistic? What has to go perfectly right for them to actually get through?
Well, those models are operating on traditional group stage logic, but the 2026 format fundamentally alters the strategic calculus. The tournament has expanded to 48 teams.
Right. This means the top 2 teams advance, but the 8 best third-place teams also secure a spot in the round of 32.
FlashScore breaks down the math. If South Africa can secure a single draw, grinding out a 0-0 against Mexico, or weathering the storm against Czechia, and manage to physically overpower South Korea for a win, they finish with 4 points.
In this expanded format, 4 points is almost a statistical guarantee of advancing as a third-place team. Bruce doesn't need to engineer 3 perfect performances. He just needs to extract 4 points from the chaos.
The margin for error remains 0, however. Ronwen Williams cannot misread a single Mexican shot in the altitude, the center backs must be flawless against Czechia, and Lyle Foster has to convert the 1 or 2 chances he will get against South Korea.
While the players prepare to navigate this tactical gauntlet on the pitch, we have to talk about what the fans are going through just to get to the stadium. As we discussed, the very identity of Bafana Bafana was forged by the voices in the stands.
The tyranny of distance is a massive, often overlooked variable in this tournament. We reviewed a comprehensive study by GIGA Calculator that analyzed the logistical difficulty for fans of all 38 qualified nations.
And South Africa ranked dead last. Their fans face the most punishing road to the World Cup of any nation on Earth.
The metrics are just staggering. They scored a 9.53 out of 10 in overall difficulty. Fans are looking at an average of 19.3 hours of travel time.
The flight costs average are $27,053. Securing a visa was given the maximum difficulty score of 20.
If a fan miraculously navigates the travel and the bureaucracy, they face skyrocketing ticket costs, hitting up to R68,000 for later stages.
And sources note that the current political and geopolitical climate in the host nations is adding an extra layer of hesitation for international travelers navigating the visa process. We're just reporting what the data says, but it's a real factor for people trying to make the trip.
The psychological impact of this logistical nightmare will manifest directly on the pitch. Bafana Bafana is a highly emotional collective. They historically feed off the momentum, the songs, and the energy of their supporters.
Does the lack of vuvuzelas and home support negate their domestic chemistry? Can a team that thrives on emotion survive in a vacuum? Because they will face the deafening hostility of the Azteca without a single pocket of yellow and green in the stands to offer them a psychological lifeline.
It is the ultimate stress test for Hugo Bruce's entire philosophy. He has spent years trying to rewire this team to rely on rigid structure rather than volatile emotion.
If the club chemistry between the Sundowns and Pirates players holds firm when their lungs are burning in Mexico City, his system works. If they still require the roar of the crowd to maintain their defensive discipline, the structure will collapse.
When you pull all of these threads together, the story of Bafana's 2026 campaign is defined by deep structural contradictions.
They possess brilliant, built-in domestic chemistry that masks a terrifying lack of global tactical exposure.
They have forged a disciplined, physically imposing defensive unit to compensate for a severe inability to organically score goals.
And they represent a nation that deeply loves them, but mathematically cannot afford to travel to support them.
At the absolute center of this storm of contradictions stands Hugo Bruce, the man who brought tactical order to an administration that still struggles with basic paperwork.
Which brings us to the final, most crucial reality of this deep dive. Hugo Bruce is 74 years old. He has officially announced that he is retiring from coaching the moment South Africa's World Cup run ends.
This reality frames every single minute they will play in North America in a completely different light. Whether they crash out in the group stage, as the models predict, or orchestrate a miraculous run to the knockout rounds, this specific iteration of South African football, this disciplined family business, will evaporate the second the final whistle blows.
It forces you to wonder if the traditional model of international football itself is becoming obsolete. Bafana is relying entirely on the cohesive infrastructure of massive domestic clubs like Sundowns to survive.
Right. If a national team can only compete by essentially operating as a proxy for a corporate club team, what happens when the architect leaves?
Do they retain the structure Bruce drilled into them, or do they immediately slide back into the wilderness of tactical confusion and administrative chaos without him?
You have to watch that opening match against Mexico, not just to see if they can survive the altitude, but to see if the system they built can outlast the man who built it.
Keep an eye on Mofokin trying to pick the lock in the center, watch Williams organize the wall, and pay attention to Bruce on the touchline, knowing this is the final performance of the band. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Bafana's 2026 campaign. We'll catch you on the next one.